Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with 12 neglected masterpieces by major composers. And I really mean masterpieces, and I really mean major composers. These are works that, for whatever reason, just don't get the attention they deserve. And I need to thank a viewer for suggesting that I do this list. I think it's a very interesting topic. Some of you may have suggestions of your own, because there is no shortage of neglected masterpieces by great composers. The reason for this is simple. It's because there's only so many hours in the day. We only have so much time. And even though the recording industry has wildly changed the way that we consume and understand and have access to the output of even very, very prolific composers, the canon of classical music, the list of the great works, was determined largely in the 19th century, because most of these composers lived then, some first half of the 20th century too, and largely by how much time there was for actual orchestras to play things for actual audiences in the limited number of concerts that would occur in any given year. So that means you had to be very selective, and people only chose the best or the easiest or the most popular or whatever the criteria were. And that reduced the list of what was available to us, and that list became ossified or canonicized or canonized or whatever you want to call it. And that's our list. And so there's a lot of stuff that's outside it that doesn't deserve to be. And I have 12. So let's get right to it, shall we? Mozart, his 25th Piano Concerto. That's number one. Now, the Piano Concerto number 25 is generally conceded to be one of Mozart's very greatest piano concerti, but it's not one of his most popular. It's in C major. It's fabulously intricate as regards form. It actually has wonderful nuances of tonality and interchange between the piano and the orchestra. It was the piece that Donald Francis Tovey chose as his exemplar of classical concerto form. I mean, it's a really major work. It's got trumpets and drums in it. It's one of Mozart's grand concertos, but it doesn't get a lot of play. It's surrounded by number 24 in C minor, which is one of Mozart's great minor key concertos, and then the Coronation Concerto on the other side, which is like a pathetic shadow of number 25, with a very, very unfinished piano part, as Mozart left it, but it's got a nickname. It has a nickname. People like the nickname. So number 25 really deserves some close listening and careful attention, because it's just amazing. And people who claim to love Mozart really should love number 25. Next, Aaron Copland, his Short Symphony. I've talked about this piece before in my list of great symphonies numbers 2. This is Copland's Second Symphony. It is not one of his populist works, like the Third Symphony or the great Western ballets like Rodeo or Appalachian Spring or Billy the Kid. It is a modernist piece. It is extremely difficult to play. It was so difficult to play that Copland later arranged it as a chamber work. And it's very rarely performed. It's only about 15 minutes long in 3 movements, but rhythmically so intricate and really difficult, because the melodic line transfers from one instrument to the next in the middle of these very complex rhythms, making the exchanges between the ensemble very, very tricky. What a wonderful work it is. But it's not easy listening. It's not difficult, and not by today's standards, not at all. But it just, where are you going to put it? 15 minutes. You need lots of rehearsal time. It's a tricky piece. And that's why it isn't as popular as it deserves to be. But it's still absolutely fabulous. A serious masterpiece and a landmark in the history of 20th century music, I think. But there you go. It doesn't matter. It deserves more attention than it gets. Next, Richard Strauss's Macbeth. Now, I love Macbeth. Macbeth is one of the earliest of the great Strauss tone poems, the Big 12. It is the most neglected of them all. I think it's fabulous. It's exciting. Oh my goodness. It is perhaps neglected because it is the one that follows the program most closely. You'll note that after Macbeth, Strauss's programmatic inclinations sort of tended toward the philosophical. He could write lots of Strauss music and give things fanciful titles, but on the whole, he was trying to be sort of more abstract and more serious while still calling things tone poems. Macbeth is very straight ahead. You've got themes that represent the characters. You've got battles. You've got murders. It's a very grim, gaunt, exciting piece of music. I think it's absolutely splendid. It's the closest Strauss ever got to a Liszt tone poem, which may be why it's the least popular. Liszt tone poems being generally derided by the critical fraternity. But it's marvelous. And it's been recorded a lot of times now. It deserves to be paid attention to seriously and given some love, because it's just a big hunk of bloodthirsty red orchestral meat. Yum, terrific. If you like your steak tartare, actually I can't stand the stuff, but never mind. It's wonderful. Next, Mendelssohn, Symphony No. 1. Now you got to remember something. Mendelssohn's First Symphony in C minor was actually his 14th or 13th, somewhere like that, because he wrote 12 string symphonies plus an extra movement or two, and then he wrote his First Symphony. It is incomprehensible why nobody pays attention to this symphony. Even Mendelssohn, he wrote it and he substituted the Scherzo of the octet orchestrated for the original Scherzo of the First Symphony just to make it more popular, because the octet was going like gangbusters. But it's a wonderful piece. It's fresh, it's youthful, it's Mozartian in its essential form, but Mendelssohnian and romantic in its orchestration, in its color, in its drive. I mean, every time I play it, I listen to it and I go, wow, why don't we ever hear this thing? Outside of boxes of Mendelssohn symphony cycles, give it some separate attention. It will amaze you, I guarantee it, especially the finale, which goes like the wind and has this sudden change to a major key, to C major. At the very, very end, it's going da 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 da, and all of a sudden, blam! It's in the major key, and it all goes crazy until the end. Oh my God, it's exciting. It's really exciting and fun to listen to. So after that, totally separate. Totally separate. You'll notice I'm running through this list rather quickly because we don't need to dawdle on any one of them. I think the point is simply to present them and then turn you loose to go for it at your own pace. The list of all these works is down below, as usual. So, Shostakovich's Suite on Verses by Michelangelo. This is kind of a secret piece among Shostakovichniks. It really is, because it's one of his great works, his last works. You could have called it a symphony because it's symphonic in conception. It's for bass soloist and orchestra. The poetry is beautiful. The verses by Michelangelo are wonderful. They've been very carefully chosen. The idiom is similar to that of the 14th Symphony. The 14th Symphony is the bleakest thing Shostakovich ever wrote. It's, 15 poems about death. This is not as bleak as that, although the unanimity of the bass voice throughout the entire cycle does give it a certain darkness. But the last poem, Immortality, oh my, it's one of the most haunting things that Shostakovich ever wrote. It really is. And all of them are wonderfully set in that very sparse, very direct, no-nonsense, late Shostakovich style. The orchestration is just perfectly clean and clear. It's really a confessional work by Shostakovich. One of those pieces where I think we come really, really as close as we can to his inner being, something that he masked from the world as much as he possibly could until the very end of his life, when it no longer made any difference. And this is just one of those pieces that if you like Shostakovich, if you admire him, you really, really need to hear it. It's a stunning piece of music. It exists in two versions, for piano and for orchestra. You want to have the orchestral version. There's no comparison between the two. It's really, really stunning. And I'm going to do a separate talk on it at some point. Maybe more than one, who knows, depending on what comes out. It's been recorded quite a bit now. So it's readily available, but not often discussed, and really I don't think it's given the importance it deserves, especially in terms of a composer whose life existed in musical cryptograms, where this piece has nothing of the of dissimulation about it. It's just straight ahead, follow the words, listen to the music, and weep, basically. So after that, oh wow, baby, Rossini's opera Ermione. Now, this was an opera that Rossini himself preserved. He saved its manuscript. It failed. It was one of his Neapolitan operas. He did it for Naples. It only survived 7 performances. It was withdrawn, and it was never performed again for like 100 and some odd years. After that, it's one of his great tragic utterances. And of course, no one pays attention to it because Rossini's not supposed to do great tragic utterances. But Ermione is really a great tragic utterance. The story is based on Racine's play Andromache. You know the story of Andromache. She's the wife of Hector, and she doesn't want to get married to Pyrrho, and Ermione wants to marry Pyrrho, and then Orestes shows up, and there's a whole imbroglio in which finally Ermione, who is just consumed by jealousy, she is one of the all-time great portraits in all-consuming female jealousy in opera. And you know what that means. That means, whoa, watch out. It's absolutely extraordinary, incredible and amazing. And oh my goodness, when it's the very end, when it's just nuts. Pyrrho gets killed. Ermione is hysterical. Orestes goes insane and gets hauled off by his men. It's really, really amazing, and you owe it to yourself. You really owe it to yourself to hear Ermione. It's just amazing. An amazing piece. The overture is even incredible. It's not your typical Rossini overture. It was actually written for this opera, and it gets interrupted by a couple of choral laments, which makes it, even more unusual. It is a free-form piece, through composed musically. I mean, it was absolutely doomed. It has so many original features in it, and that's why Rossini thought it was special. He actually said that it wouldn't be appreciated till 100 years after he died. And it still isn't, as much as it should be. Great work. Absolutely a great work. So after that, let's see, where are we? Up to number 7, I think. Debussy, his Fantasy for piano and orchestra. Everyone loves Debussy. Everyone loves his piano music. He wrote a piano concerto. Nobody cares. It gets recorded once in a while, usually as a filler to like the Ravel concertos or some other French thing. It's gorgeous. Okay, it's early Debussy. It's not all fluffy and impressionist. It's not all as harmonically intriguing as he later became. It's not as hard-edged and modernist as his etudes. It's more like Massenet and those people. I love Massenet and those people. What's wrong with that? You tell me. It's 25 minutes of just fabulously beautiful, affecting, wonderfully scored music full of lovely tunes, and I don't get it. It should be played like any other great piano concerto. Of course, it's not called a concerto. Debussy always avoided German forms. He wrote symphonic things like La Mer, which he doesn't call a symphony, and he wrote a concerto, which he called a fantasy, but it is marvelous. Absolutely marvelous. So give it a shot. You've probably got it stuck on a record somewhere, gathering dust. Silly that people ignore this piece just because it's early and therefore supposedly immature. Who cares? What matters is how good it is, and it's terrific. It's absolutely terrific. It's one of his major works, one of his big instrumental works. Yeah, there you go. Most people don't even know it exists. Unbelievable. After that, Liszt. We have to do some Liszt because he wrote tons and tons of music, most of which is roundly ignored. But, he didn't write that much original music that is based on mostly his own material. He wrote a lot of original music based on other people's material, but his own material is interesting stuff because Liszt was not a tunesmith. He was a harmony guy, an interesting harmony guy. And one of his most fascinating early works from the mid-1830s, the same time as the Transcendental Etudes and all of that, that first flowering of his virtuosic genius, is the three apparitions. They are really, really interesting, especially the last one, which is a fantasy on a waltz by Schubert. And boy, this waltz goes through some fantastic apparitional manipulations. The piano writing is extremely modernist. The notation is extremely modernist, although you don't hear it, obviously, when it's being played so much. But these three movements are so evocative and so different from anything else that was being written in the 1830s, and so just sort of Liszt's naked genius on display. And he didn't revise them 450 times. Maybe that's why we don't hear them that often. I don't understand why we don't hear them that often. I mean, they are, the Apparitions is a remarkable piece, a very, very remarkable piece, and a landmark in the history of piano writing and Liszt's own development. Liszt, of course, is so denigrated by everybody for so many reasons, quite often, and so shown so little respect in the critical fraternity. Of course, there are Liszt musicologists, and there's a Liszt Academy, and there's a Liszt Stiftung in Weimar, and all of that stuff is out there. But he really, really deserves to get some serious attention, given to his more questing pieces. And, some of those are late, but some of those also are early. And the Apparitions is, I think, the coolest of the early ones. Give it a shot. You'll be fascinated, I guarantee. After that, let's see. Oh, goodness gracious. Robert Schumann, his Overture, Scherzo, and Finale. Oh, what a beautiful piece this is. It's a great Schumann orchestral work. It's well orchestrated. Tovey said he should have called it a sinfonietta, and then everybody would listen to it. And I think that's true. The title makes such a big difference. When you see Overture, Scherzo, and Finale, you think, oh, it's just a hodgepodge of stuff. But this isn't. It's a major work. It's a big three-movement piece. It doesn't have a slow movement. It doesn't really matter. Schumann's slow movements were usually rather small, except for like the Adagio and like the Second Symphony. Most of the time they were sort of song-like lyrical bits. Leaving one out doesn't damage anything. And it's a tremendously exciting and beautiful piece. It's coupled with the symphonies in the that fabulous Savola Schumann symphony cycle with the Staatskapelle Dresden. He did it. You've got to hear this piece if you like Schumann and if you like Schumann symphonies. It's unaccountable. You never see it programmed in concert. Goodness gracious, I don't think I've ever seen it performed. I've never seen it performed. I mean, I know I haven't, but I've also never even seen it programmed. I mean, it must be done once in a while. It's a perfect concert opener. It's a little longer than your average overture, granted, but why not do something a little meatier or do a second half piece or something? I don't know. Just play the bloody thing. It's wonderful, wonderful. Next, Vaughan Williams. Don't we all love Vaughan Williams? His 5 Tudor portraits, probably his greatest choral work and his most neglected. Why? Because the poetry is sort of racy Elizabethan poetry. It's very secular, and it's full of funny imagery and naughty lyrics, and it's just wonderful. But Vaughan Williams was known as a visionary, and especially as that pertains to choral music. Everybody wants to hear the sacred stuff. You want to hear Dona Nobis Pacem, Sancta Civitas. Actually, that's ignored just about as much. Hodie, maybe, during Christmas. I don't know. It's one of those pieces when I first heard it. First of all, I didn't know it was a choral work. I thought it was actually an orchestral piece, like, the portraits for 3 portraits from the England of Elizabeth, the film score. But to find out that it's like a 45-minute major, it's a choral symphony, essentially. I mean, that's what it is. And it would be a fabulous, big, juicy, sink your teeth into it choral concert work, like Belshazzar's Feast or Rachmaninoff's The Bells, or some of those pieces that get played, at least once in a while. It's like that. It's major stuff. Britain's Spring Symphony. I mean, why not do the 5 Tudor portraits? I did a talk about it. Oh my goodness, what a great work. It's only been recorded about 3 times. It's really kind of amazing. But it's the essence of Vaughan Williams in so many respects. The non-visionary Vaughan Williams, let's just say, which is fine because that's what he was most of the time. Just remarkable work by a remarkable composer, and one nobody has time for. Only 2 to go. Next, Tchaikovsky, Hamlet. Yeah, he did a Hamlet. He did more Shakespeare than Romeo and Juliet. Hamlet gets ignored because Romeo and Juliet is so crazy famous. It's really very simple. And because Hamlet is a scarier story and doesn't have a love tune. There's no love interest in Hamlet. There's a feminine interest in Ophelia, of course. And the work does have its sort of soft or more feminine side. But basically, it's almost like Strauss's Macbeth. It's kind of a bloodthirsty story, and Tchaikovsky follows it. You've got Hamlet, you've got Ophelia, you've got the play, you've got the ghost, you've got a few whacks on the tam-tam at the appropriate moment. It just, for some reason, hasn't caught on. But it's as great a work as Tchaikovsky ever wrote. I mean, Tchaikovsky wrote his share of junk. We know that. And some of his junk is some of his most popular stuff. But Hamlet, he really took seriously. It was fabulously recorded by Leopold Stokowski. Leonard Bernstein championed it. I mean, there have been some great performances of Hamlet, but it doesn't get much play or much attention. It'd be a nice thing to do to play it with Strauss's Macbeth. Maybe I'll do an unknown Strauss tone poem talk at some point. But Tchaikovsky's Hamlet is major Tchaikovsky. And if it isn't as easy to listen to as the rest of his, well, then that's what you tell people who say that Tchaikovsky wrote junk and it's all just romantic slobbering and, doesn't deserve serious attention. Well, Hamlet is a serious, somewhat thorny work. And it doesn't reveal its secrets instantly. And so what? So you have to pay attention to it. Don't think Tchaikovsky's worth it? Well, listen to Hamlet. It will do you good. Trust me. But last but not least, however, we have to wrap this up with one of my all-time favorite works by Dvorak. The great unknown Dvorak. And it's his opera, The Devil and Kate. This one blows my mind. The Devil and Kate, actually, it's sitting right here. Ooh, pardon me. I think I have one right here. What's this? No, that's the Jacobin. I'm going to do something on Dvorak operas. Here it is. Here's The Devil and Kate. There are only 2 recordings of it. This one on Orfeo, thank God, it's excellent. And the earlier one on Superphone, conducted by Jerzy Pinkas, thank God, it's excellent. This is one of the great comic operas of the entire 19th century. And it's ignored because, A, it's a comic opera and the universe only has room for Falstaff and Falstaff and, the Mozarts and Smetana's The Bartered Bride. That's a comic opera. And, virtually nothing else. I mean, people just don't care. Die Meistersinger, some people think it's funny. Anyway, why don't we pay attention to this? The story is delightful. Kate is this really kind of obstreperous young girl who's annoyed that she's pushy and forceful, and so no one will dance with her. And she shows up at the dance, and Maribel, who is a devil sent by Satan to suck the evil princess who is opposing the local populace. She's oppressing the local populace. He's sent to suck her down to hell. And he gets a little bit confused, and he grabs Kate instead. They do this fabulous dance. It's just hilarious when she gets sucked down to hell. And she makes life hell for Satan and the devils because she's just so pushy. I mean, it's a wonderful, wonderful work. All she wants is a house and an occasional dance. And she's going to stop at nothing until she gets it. So Satan throws her out of hell and tells Maribel to go get the right princess. But the correct princess is horrified because she knows she's been evil. and she knows that the devil is coming to get her, and so she's repentant, but it's too late because Mariabelle is there. So the shepherd, whatever his name is, Fluffnick or something, he's Czech, says he has a way to save her if she agrees to leave everybody alone and be nice henceforth, which of course she does. So she's sitting there waiting for Mariabelle to show up, and he shows up in all of his satanic majesty, and Kate steps out from behind the door because she's annoyed because she was promised all kinds of riches and gold and stuff, and all of it turned to like dead leaves as soon as she left hell. So she wants her revenge, and she is pissed. So she comes running out to give Mariabelle, the devil, a what for, and he sees Kate coming at him, and he just runs like hell, and the princess is safe, and the people are happy, and Kate gets her house, and then, it's delicious. It's wonderful. Dvorak was a violist in the Prague Provisional Theater, whatever it was called. It was one of the major theater operatic orchestras, and that orchestra specialized in doing operetta. I mean, I did a series in my book on Dvorak on all of the works they played. Most of them were like by Offenbach and Lecoq and, the great French operetta composers. And Dvorak knew that style. So for the scene in Hell, he's able to parody, on the one hand, Wagner. He does his Nibelheim imitation at the beginning of Act 2. And also the Offenbachian can-can type thing for all the dances of the little devils in Hell and whatnot. And there's the middle of it is the satanic dance, which is as wonderful a Slavonic dance as Dvorak ever wrote. I mean, the music is just full of that lightness and effervescence, and fortified by, Slavic soulfulness and Czech folk music, and it has an amazing overture, like 12 minutes long. I mean, it should be played separately. Why is this ignored? It's okay. We do things that are in Czech now. We can do it, and we can do Dvorak besides Rusalka. It has beautiful arias, wonderful choruses, terrific orchestral music. It's a masterpiece, a late Dvorak masterpiece that is completely and disgracefully disregarded. So that is my talk on the 12 fabulous works of music that, for some reason, by major composers, that are masterpieces that just don't get time of day. You will give them time of day, I know. So keep on listening, friends. Thanks so much for joining me. Take care.